These are 10 of the craziest conspiracy theories ever shared on the Joe Rogan Experience.
So,
hunting Hitler.
Are there any legitimate eyewitness accounts of Hitler in South America? Or potentially legitimate?
Absolutely, potentially.
Whoa.
Yep. Eyewitness accounts. I saw him get off a boat. I saw him meet here. And if it was just some person saying it, it's almost meaningless.
Right.
But if you look at the context of who this person is, the wealth that they have that they shouldn't have, like, can you explain how you got so rich in 2 generations? You know, like, okay, your grandpa got here from Germany in 1946. That's weird. And he's on a legitimate visa with an Argentinian passport. Also weird. And now he's a war refugee that's now worth millions of dollars. How does this work? But people, and then this is the hard part, people want to be connected to significant events, and especially in small rural areas of the world, developing areas. Like there's so little happening. They want to be attached to something massive. And like the fact that they saw a U-boat land on this beach, and the hatch opened, and these cars were sitting there and they were doing Morse code, and this guy gets off and he had this little mustache. You're like, well, but U-boats can't beach. That's not how that works.
Right.
But you know what they're trying to do. They just want to be connected.
Yeah.
So, and now we're removed 70 to 80 years from the facts. It has been painful to try to use real science, real investigative tools to try to sift through this lore,
Yeah, there they are.
Yeah.
1952 UFO incident. Thank you very much.
Look at that photo. That is a crazy
beautiful
photo.
Come on, let's go here now,
That's crazy.
folks. Yeah, that ain't an airplane. That ain't a helicopter.
No, it's a crazy photograph, and it's from 1952.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the special effects back then were incredibly crude.
No,
this was something that was reported by
thousands of people.
people.
They scrambled jets from Andrews for it and everything.
As well as the Phoenix Lights.
The Phoenix Lights is fascinating because the Fife Symington, the governor, said he saw them. He made fun of it with an alien.
But he
dummy.
talked about that afterwards.
Yeah.
He was put under pressure to do so.
Yeah.
He's in a movie called, what is it? There's a documentary on Netflix that's available that he's in, that he talks about the pressure that they put on him to make light of that incident, and he talks about his own personal experiences with seeing some sort of triangle-shaped craft that was enormous, the size of several football fields. It was flying overhead, that was completely silent, and how it freaked him out. I think
the triangle and delta crafts are very, very interesting. But the Tinley Park incidents of the 80s, and with Sam Maranto was the investigator there from MUFON. These things would park over the family barbecue for about half an hour, and families in suburbs were looking up at the sky being blotted out by these things parking above them. So, I think it comes down to I don't think these beings. Lord Hill Norton said there were 23 different species visiting the planet in 23 different types of ships. I don't think they want a formal relationship with people on Earth. They want an informal, secret relationship. I think they probably have one with elements of black elements of the Air Force and the government.
I had this guy Graham Hancock on, and he was talking to me about all the different shit that they're finding in the Amazon and in South America, and that there used to be 20 million people that lived in the Amazon, and they died off because of sickness. They were visited mostly, apparently Europeans, when they came in the 1500s, they would tell these incredible stories about these huge civilizations in the Amazon. But then when explorers came back 200 years later, there was nothing there. And they were like, this is crazy. They lied. They must have lied. But it turns out they didn't lie. What happened was smallpox ran through the fucking jungle and killed everybody.
We did it.
And then the jungle just overtook these cities. And now they're finding these cities with something called LiDAR. They use these planes and they circle over this area, or helicopters, whatever the fuck they do. And they shoot this shit down, this LiDAR. It's like laser radar, and it gives you a detailed image of what's below the surface and what's there.
Shit.
And it shows them all these crazy structures, all these like roadways and irrigation systems and circles inside of a square. Like, it was villages and cities, and millions of people probably lived there.
Fuck.
And look at it. That's all the stuff they're finding now.
What?
Yeah, and all of it was swallowed up by the jungle. They think within like 100 years, it just vanished in the jungle.
Wow.
Because it's so lush and tropical down there. Do you have anything in this book about the Olmecs?
No, not really. I mentioned them briefly. I explored the Olmec mystery in considerable depth.
Could you explain that to people that maybe
in Fingerprints of the Gods? Yes. So it's considered to be the earliest high culture of Central America. Everybody's heard about the Aztecs. Everybody's heard about the Maya. But before the Aztecs and before the Maya, there were a culture who are referred to as the Olmecs. Again, we don't know what they called themselves. That's what the Aztecs called them. They called them the Olmecs, and it means the rubber people because that a rubber-producing area of Mexico. They worked in giant megalithic constructions. What they're most famous for is these huge carved human heads, which can be on a scale of up to 20 to 25 tons in weight, and which have curious features which have been interpreted variously as Polynesian, African, don't look like classic Native American features.
Keep that up.
But one of the things I've realized is that there is no classic Native American feature. That Native Americans are have a very complex genetic story with very many different elements brought into it, and we shouldn't be necessarily surprised by the supposedly non-Native American look of these Olmec heads.
What do we think those helmets were that they were wearing?
Nobody knows, because no physical example of such a helmet has ever been found, just like no physical example of an Egyptian pharaoh's crown has ever been found. All we see is the stone reproductions of them.
Do they universally wear these helmets in these stone reproductions?
They pretty much all wear these helmets in the Olmec stonework. There's another fascinating figure from La Venta, one of the Olmec sites, which is the earliest ever image of a plumed or feathered serpent. The feathered serpent is a famous icon in Central America. Quetzalcoatl, who's the god of peace, the bringer of civilization, who is associated, for example, with the famous pyramid of Kukulkan, which is just another name for Quetzalcoatl at Chichen Itza, where on the spring equinox a shadow effect creates the image of a serpent coiling down the stairway and joining with the carved head of the serpent. There's the image from La Venta. That's the earliest image of a plumed serpent in the Americas. And sitting in the middle of it, and I made a big deal out of this because I think it is a big deal in Magicians of the Gods, sitting in the middle of it is this human figure who's holding this strange bag in his hand. And it's just a fact that those identical bags are found in ancient Sumer in the hands of individuals who were considered to be civilization bringers, and they also show up on Pillar 43 at Göbekli Tepe. I call them man bags. And in that case, at Göbekli Tepe, we know they're at least 11,600 years old. So I wonder if we're looking at a sort of badge of office of a group of civilizers who traveled around the world trying to bring back to life a lost
giant anacondas. Like, because there's always been this thing about enormous anacondas that live in the rainforest.
So, yeah, there's fascinating. So I love anacondas. I believe, and I've got a colleague, Brian Fry, in Australia, actually, and he has a similar belief that there are 30-foot anacondas. Now, 30 is a big anaconda, but you're talking about those mysterious, like 50, 100-footers.
Yeah.
Okay, so take out the Amazon and take out anacondas for a second.
Okay.
All right? Think about where all the largest snakes are in the world. Okay?
Florida.
Well, now, yes, but we've got all these wet tropical environments that house these huge snakes. In Indonesia, you have reticulated pythons, you have Burmese pythons, you have African rock pythons, Indian rock pythons, anacondas, all these big snakes.
Yeah.
The only place that has a wet, tropical, humid, high density of prey environment that doesn't have a massive snake is the Congo, Central Africa. Now,
Interesting.
Stay with me. That area is home to some African rock python stuff, but not big monster anaconda-sized ones, right? But during World War II, there was a colonel who flew over there, and this was a well-respected colonel. I'm sure, Jamie, you'll be able to find this very quickly. A well-respected, I forget, he had his wings or his patch of honor or whatever, very distinguished, who him and his 2 passengers in the plane both reported a 100-foot long snake. They flew over it once. They're like, wait a minute, what is that? They were Dutch Belgium in the Congo. They flew over it once, went, what is that? And flew over it 2 more times to verify it, and got so low to the ground that they said the snake struck at the airplane. And all 3 people, the pilot, this well-respected colonel, and the 2 passengers, had the exact same story of this giant snake in Central Africa.
Interesting.
Yeah, and yet no big snake has ever been proven from there. But it's also a very poorly biologically explored area. And most of the time, when these animals get this big, snakes or otherwise, they're in very low... Yeah, here's the picture.
They took a photo of it?
They did. Yeah, they did. They're in very low densities. So, that's the real photo over on the left there.
What did they think it was?
They thought it was a giant snake, a 50-foot long...
So that's the photo right there?
I believe so. But the story's fascinating of these colonels.
But they don't know like what kind of snake. They don't know if it was an anaconda or a python. Or...
It would be an undescribed species because the only snake there, the African rock python, doesn't get that big.
What is the biggest snake that we know? Oh, it says it measured approximately 50 feet in length, saw brown-green with a white belly, has a triangle-shaped jaw and a head 3 by 2 feet. Oh my God. A 3-foot head. The photo was later analyzed and verified to be genuine. Van Leerd claims that, is that how you say his name?
I'm not sure, but that was the Colonel, Remy Van Leerd.
As he flew lower for a closer inspection, the snake rose up approximately 10 feet, giving a warning that it would have attacked a helicopter if it had been within striking range. Now, the Great Pyramid of Giza is probably the most stunning of all these ancient structures. And the stones are immense, and some of them were cut from a quarry that's hundreds of miles away. How do you think they did that?
Well, some of them, the granite in the Great Pyramid comes from more than 500 miles to the south. If you look at the famous King's Chamber, its walls and its roof are, the ceiling of the King's Chamber are all made with gigantic granite blocks.
Stunning detail.
Stunning detail. Those blocks on the the roof of the King's Chamber weigh 70 tons each. Now, Egyptologists will tell you that, they could move heavy blocks because they put them on wet sand and they push them along on wet sand. Well, maybe if you're just at ground level, that will do. But when you're 350 feet above the ground, as you are in the King's Chamber, that won't do at all. I don't know how they did it. All I know is they did it. I don't think anybody knows how they did it, how they lifted those stones, how they brought them up to that level. I think we're looking, again, at a lost technology. And it was this ancient apocalypse 12,800 years ago that wiped that from the human memory banks almost completely. Not entirely completely because there were survivors, but removed most of it. Randall will tell you, sea level rise, it creates a powerful high energy zone. Anything that was existing on those flooded coastlines has just been pounded to hell. I mean, talk about it, Randall.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's going to be a lot more energetic than now. I mean, imagine your sea level rising at 3 or 4 times at least faster than we've seen rise in the last century. And within there, juxtaposed are these episodes of very rapid sea level rise. So you're talking about a very energetic intertidal zone. And anything that's there, short of large megalithic blocks, is going to be utterly obliterated by the time the process is through. And I think that this is one of the things that, the archaeologists and the prehistorians, people are looking at that, have failed to take into account the severity of these events we're talking about. Because the question always is, where are the artifacts? Where's the pottery? Where is the evidence that this civilization existed? And I have 2 responses to that. One, you don't realize the extent of the total remodeling of this planetary surface that took place. Because, I mean, we could get into some of the stuff here. I have tons of images where I think maybe we'll get a chance to pull up a couple of really awesome drone footage here before we're done. But once you begin to wrap your head around this, you go, really? It's like, imagine that you drop an atomic bomb on a city and it completely obliterates it. And then a short while later, you drop another one on the same place. What's going to be left? And then 10,000 years, 20,000 years goes by. What are you going to find? What are you going to look for? It's going to be just rubble that gets reincorporated just into the geological stratum, and it's going to be very difficult to differentiate, for example, from what's called a conglomeratic rock, which is basically we have just a huge jumble of broken rock cemented together, right? Now, within there could be all kinds of stuff that's not even recognized as being artificial in the sense that humans had anything to do with it. The other thing is when we talk about these ancient technologies, if we're only looking for a mirror reflection of ourselves, we could overlook it completely, because I think there's evidence that exists now. I mean, some modern researchers whose work has been buried or suppressed, I think we're getting very close to rediscovering some of the things that our ancient ancestors were up to.
There's so many things, like the where the water flows to the south, where there's clear evidence of water erosion that took place after the volcano. There's so much that points to that possibly being Atlantis.
And what people don't realize is that Sahara Africa, up until about 4,500 to 5,000 years ago, was totally green. It was tropical. It had the largest network, or one of the largest networks of rivers ever known to exist. It had the largest freshwater lake ever known to exist, which is Mega Lake Chad, which, just to put this into perspective, it is, if you take all the North American Great Lakes combined, that's 94,000 square miles of surface area, whereas Mega Lake Chad was 139,000.
Whoa.
Massive. Additionally, Atlantis, the capital, was said to have a river that went just north of it or next to it, and the Tamanrasset River went right through the Rishat structure, or just north of it, went all the way to the Atlas Mountains that I described, which is in modern-day Morocco. And the evidence is that it existed at that same period of time when Atlantis was said to be around 11,600 years ago prior to its destruction, up until about 5,000 years ago. So go over a couple, that is the mountain, and you can see those striations, which are signature traits of water erosion. All those white blemishes are salt, and I should point out real quick that it is a confirmed fact that much of the Sahara has surface level salt. And you see those white blemishes on that mountain? That is not cloud, that is not snow. Those are salt deposits.
And surface level salt that would have been from the ocean?
That is what I suggest, because in the middle of that caldera, you have huge patches of salt. And is it reasonable to suggest that that salt existed before the creation of that volcano? Because it seems to me that all that that salt would burn up. And,
right.
and not only that, there is scientific studies that show that there are gastropods, which are sea life, that existed inside that caldera that used to be 1,000 feet deep and dried up just a few thousand years ago. So the fact that this is an 11,000-foot volcano that has salt on top of it, I would say is corresponding evidence that the ocean had once went through it. And if you go over a couple more images, Jamie, you will see far better images that show you that. Okay, so notice how it cuts off. You see to the black right here? That is a lava flow that's dated around 12,000 or so years ago. And regardless of whether the volcano or that water erosion happened 12,000 years ago or 2 million years ago, that in itself is evidence that the ocean blasted through the Sahara Desert literally 50 to 60 million years more recently than previously known. And the implications of this, as far as climate science, as far as the topic of geology and cataclysms, cannot be overstated. I mean, does it not look like that lava flow was cut off by whatever type of erosion that is? Does it? I mean, that's...
Yeah, completely. Yeah, it's such a clean line. And it aligns with all the water erosion marks that are to the left of it. Can you make that smaller, Jamie? Can you make it, stretch it out? Yeah.
And, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Nothing. It's just like you could really clearly see that it looks like a line, like a water line passed through what was marked by the volcanic eruption.
And this is one thing I say, I'm like, it's visible to anyone that has eyes to see, but it turns out that the Sahara Desert is one of the least studied places on Earth.
You want to hear another conspiracy theory that you probably don't know? It's going to blow your mind?
Let's do it.
The day before 9/11, the day before the attacks, Rumsfeld gave a press conference where he talked about trillions of dollars missing. The day. Then a plane slams into the very part of the building where they were doing the accounting. Blows up half the fucking building in the Pentagon. Blows up a wall. Donald Rumsfeld was on, where was it, the White House lawn?
According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
2.3.
Okay, now, again, somebody told you that literally, like right before 9/11 happened, they said they couldn't track $2.3 trillion. You'd go, no, that didn't happen. That did not happen, but it did happen.
What the fuck?
Yeah, so think about what Kennedy said.
Yeah.
Think about what you saw when you saw that Vice movie, where Dick Cheney, who was the CEO of Halliburton, becomes a vice president and gets billions of dollars in no-bid contracts. Now think about what we just saw with Donald Rumsfeld saying they couldn't find $2.3 trillion. I don't know where it went. I don't know. Seems like we should have had it. So, like, we'll keep looking. Oh no, the spot where we looked just blew up.
Oh my god. What the
Find out
hell?
if that's true. If it was the accounting office, because this is what I love to say it because it sounds good. But let's make sure it's true that part blew up. But either way, that he did say that, and then they did get hit by a plane a couple of days later.
It's unbelievable.
It's so crazy, and no one talks about that $1 trillion. No one talks about the 2.3 trillion. You know, that was the theory that Terence McKenna had to the thing that's going to change the universe. Is that one day someone's going to invent a time machine, and that when they invent a time machine, all time ceases to become linear. So you think if you have a time machine, well, I'll just go back to the time where they were making the pyramids and I'll watch them do it. That's not what it works like. What he was saying, you can't travel where there are no roads. So once a road gets built, then you can travel. So once a time machine gets invented, then anyone from the invention of the time machine forward to forever can come back to that moment and can go to any point in time from that moment to the end of time. So all time ceases to be linear. So there's no like tomorrow will be Wednesday and the next day will be Thursday. No. It's everything happens everywhere all at once. So people can travel back and forth through time. You can never own anything because someone could just travel through time and take it away from you when you weren't looking. Like as time travel gets more and more sophisticated, you can go back and forth in time while you're talking to people. You know, if you don't like what you said, you could rewind and start all over again. If you're in an argument with your wife, you can go to the library and get information and come back and go, actually, you know, Herodotus once said, and then bam, your wife thinks you're the smartest guy in the world. Like this, but there would be no normal life anymore. It would the world itself would be completely unrecognizable because time would mean nothing. You'd be able to travel back and forth through time.
Above the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid are 5 further chambers. And these chambers are roofed and floored with granite beams that weigh about 70 tons each. And there are hundreds of them. And these 70-ton granite beams, which to put in context, a 70-ton beam is equivalent in weight to 35 large SUVs. These 70-ton granite beams have been elevated to a height of more than 350 feet above the ground and carefully and precisely placed in position. It is very hard for archaeologists to explain how that was done using purely leverage and mechanical advantage. You can say, oh, perhaps they built a ramp and hauled the stones up the ramp. But then you have to confront basic laws of physics. You can't haul a stone weighing tens of tons up a slope that exceeds 10 degrees. Then you start doing the calculation. How long a ramp do I need with a 10-degree slope to get to 350 feet above the ground? So this begins to seem like an absurd idea, the idea that is foisted on us by archaeology. Maybe the idea that they regard as absurd, namely that psychic powers were cultivated by ancient civilizations, that they could use powers of the human mind that we have allowed to lapse. Maybe that idea deserves further consideration.